Perfect. All right, question number 2. Which admin tasks should I be streamlining with ACS?
No, and I'll take this one. At our organization, we've been able to really leverage ACS to do quite a few tasks that are difficult or impossible otherwise. Some of the so let's go to so the documentation links here will show you an introduction to ACS, basic usage, but then also the reference guide might seem a little daunting, as all reference guides might, but it's very helpful to jump into there and go look at every available endpoint just to play around with it and be like, hey, what can I do? What's available to me? And then tinker around and try not to break stuff. But it's super helpful to just go dig in and see what is available to you. Let's go to the next slide. The first thing we'll cover is index management. These are all just curl commands that I've come up with that are, here's how to hit this endpoint for an index retention change. If you use Splunk Cloud, there are settings that say you can have if you use DDAS and DDAA storage, they have limitations now that say your hot storage and your archive storage have to have a certain ratio, meaning let's say you keep the data for 30 days, your archive has to be minimum 60 days. And it used to be that you could change it to say 30 days are hot, 1 day cold, and the cold actually was nothing because it was below 30. You've got to have it say like 65 if you wanted to say 30 and 65 or something like that. And that would keep it for 65 total in archive. So if you're like, you know what, I don't want to keep all of my data for double the time, but I want to lower it just a little bit, this kind of ACS call can make that sort of change, and you can lower the retention days. Once you've initiated the index, you can then go and modify it after the fact and be dangerous. So do understand how the storage works before you go make these changes, and make sure you maybe just run it by your account team before you do something like that. But these are helpful for you to have more fine-grained control over archive storage, particularly. Access management. I have run into users. We have SAML integration for our users. It is next to impossible to yank them out of the system. ACS lets you do that. With a call like this, you're able to go in and say, with your admin authentication, you can just say, go get rid of this user ID or this user's email, whichever your kind of principal name is that you use for your users. That's been helpful to try and make sure that important people are gone from the system when they've left employment. Limits management. This is the stanza chunk at the bottom there. This is an example of what limits are available to you to manage inside of ACS. Not all limits.conf settings are available. Most of them are controlled by support still. However, some of these I have found are useful to tweak from time to time. I can't remember which one I've modified. It's probably in there, and you'll look away from default and see that, oh, I bumped up max characters or something. But these limits are useful. This is the get command to go look at the limits, but if you go look at the documentation, there will be specific usage on how to go modify other limits based on just the one value. Some of these, I believe, like max characters and max columns, you might have to put them in 3 or 4 at a time so that they're all set properly. I think it's not that you can just set one at a time for some of these, because they're in an array. You have to kind of set the whole array at once. That could have changed by now. It's been a while since I've managed that. Next slide. Okay, this is kind of the cream of the crop for us. We have a lot of apps. We have about 130 applications, with each one belonging to different departments in our group. And they've grown over a decade now. I think that we've had Splunk. It's just some people get an app spun off, and things just, yeah, it just grows. And a lot of this stuff is just old cruft that's been lying around, but we still have to keep it, manage it, deal with it. We've backed up all of our applications, stored them into GitHub, and we've kind of collapsed all the apps down so that only the core pieces are in the default folders. We can't you cannot upload local directories to Splunk Cloud. Once the default stuff is in place, users can then modify anything in local through the GUI. It is a little frustrating. It's difficult, but once you understand which folders you can play around with and which ones you can upload and download, it becomes a little easier. So for me, a typical request can come in where it's like, hey, I need a new KV store or an alert removed that is super old, but that's still in the default folder somewhere. Or a source type change. I'll go into my Git repo, go into the cleaned up app that I've built, go modify my changes, change there's an app.conf file that you have to manage. You do have to rev the version for all of your different changes. Otherwise, the cluster master node, we don't have direct access to cluster master in Splunk Cloud like we used to. The cluster master will hold these bundle files as you upload them. It's got to have a unique version. So once you've updated the app.conf and any other conf files that you're wanting to change, there is then an app. You have to run the app through app validate, the app validate API, build the package and then upload it. Sorry, build the package, validate it, and then upload it. And then I do my commit after the fact, after I've made all my changes. So this can be done through the GUI. If you go into the app management page, you can then go to, I think it's like upload files myself or whatever that second button is there. And you can go look at all of the uploaded apps that you have that are yours, your custom apps. I find it tedious to have to go into there manually and do these things. And so I've built these scripts with the ACS endpoints that I can just run like 2 or 3 scripts and it uploads everything, installs it, kicks off any search head restarts that are needed. Well, actually, no, not all the time. Depends on your settings. But so anyway, I'll walk through this process and what my scripts do a little bit. And people out there are way smarter at scripting than I am. This was my, duct tape solution that just gets it done for me. I can troubleshoot it myself. I do not recommend that anybody actually use this because I built it. So,
Real quick, Tyler, sorry to interrupt you. We have a question in the chat that just came in. Do you have a REST API endpoint to add one client to server class, which already has, let's say, 10 clients?
for a deployment system?
I think so. It looks like, yeah, they're asking a question on the deployment server.
Yeah, so ACS is a Splunk Cloud only API. With the deployment server, you won't have these particular features. You will have the API. I would say if you're curious about what things you can do against the deployment server, you can go to the REST API documentation for Splunk Enterprise, and I think there might be a deployment section. Maybe not.
Yeah, we do have REST API, but I don't think we have anything enabled for that to add a client for the DS.
Typically what you do is you'll run the command from the client and you can you can do a Splunk CLI command and all you give it is the host name and port and it subscribes. It's fairly simple. If you have something like Salt or Puppet to manage your systems, you can kick off a subscribe command fairly easily. Does that answer the question? I don't know. Basically, the answer is no, the ACS can't do that. But there are other APIs and commands you can run from your clients to do that.
Well, all right. Let us know if you have any follow-up questions. And I'll let you finish up this and then Rohit will answer your question about CMC in a minute.
Yeah, let's go back one slide real quick.
Oh yeah.
So first off, the authentication, you do have to authenticate to the app validate API. So I've just done a quick validation and I write that out to a file. And then I'm able to leverage the file later on once I've put in my Splunk.com password and such. Once I've modified my app, I've then done a simple build. If you're familiar with the Splunk app command that you can run, this is kind of what that does. It is just a glorified tar command for lack of a better definition. All we're doing is moving into the directory that you've got your app actually extracted out. do a tar with these flags, and you're able to get a good tar.gz file that's ready to upload. Next slide. Now this is the kind of the fun part, I guess. First off, I'll send the bundle to an app validate endpoint. My kids just wandered in from school. So app validate, you take the bundle and you're able to then upload that to the app inspect REST API. And then I sit there and just kind of query it every 5 seconds and say, okay, what's the status? What's the status? And it'll come back eventually, hopefully, with a success or a failure. If it does a success, I'll then automatically have it authenticate with my own bearer token. As you have to use you have to be an admin on the system, or probably have some sort of proper role created for an app builder kind of a role. Issue them a token. The users are then able to hit this endpoint, upload with their token and acknowledge it, and they can just upload the binary or the tarball up to that endpoint. It then can kick off the install if the app settings in the app.conf say, search head restart equals 1 or whatever the setting is. And with all that, I can basically just go run 3 commands, and I've configured my whole app, built a new version, uploaded it, and it takes me less than 2 minutes. And I'm able to do this like almost on repeat. Let's say that you're troubleshooting a props.conf issue. I can just churn through 3 or 4 or 5 app uploads while I'm trying to play around with it and see if the props is breaking down the data properly. And it's just super useful and fast. And so this has been ACS is your friend. Try to learn it. And again, this is for Splunk Cloud Victoria. If you're on Classic, it's much clunkier, kind of still possible, and it's a mess because it's Classic. So have fun. Do I have anything on the next slide? I think that was about it. IP allow lists. If you're using the search API and you want to expose that to your users or to a particular set of IPs, this IP allow list management is super useful. You can, rather than open it up wide, most people, I don't know, some people probably just say, hey, support, go allow me to hit port 8089 for search REST API calls, search calls. You can restrict it down to just particular subnets. This is what it looks like. I tend to keep the full list and upload a full list of the subnets every time I make this call. I don't try to just add one subnet because I'm afraid that if you do just one, it actually throws away all of them and says this is the only list. And so this one is, I would say just keep that list growing as you need it. And you should be a bit safer that way.
All right, and before we go on to the next question, we did have another question in the chat. Is there any app similar to CMC that we can use for Splunk Enterprise in Search Head instead of accessing Monitoring Console in the Cluster Manager?
No, we do not have anything like CMC. The best way is to create a custom dashboard. I believe there are add-ons or apps on Splunk base. It's called Splunk Admins. I don't know if it's still there, but I used to use that when I was on Enterprise. I took all the searches from it and I built a dashboard out of it.
There is one really simple. If the user who asked that has a deployer, a search head deployer, there is a page on the deployer that lets you see the state of all your search heads. It's very simple and it lets you kind of do rolling restarts or individual restarts of your search heads. But it's not fleshed out to the point of where it's like, here's the state of all of your searches happening per head. So, but managing them, there is a simple deployer config or a deployer page.
Yeah, and also if you don't want to manage the monitoring console on the cluster manager, try to dedicate a VM or something and put a separate node for the monitoring console. In that way, you can actually leverage that as a service monitor. You can build all the metrics and all the admin alerts over there. I've done that in the past. because I don't want to load all, because when you're monitoring an environment, you'll have like hundreds of searches again, right? So it's better to have a dedicated instance for the monitoring console, especially if you have many indexers and searches, because obviously all the searches will load up the CM. So
Want to sign up for a future community office hours? From community.splunk.com, select events, then office hours Ask the Experts to register for a session across platform, security, or observability. Hope to see you in the next one.